We're standing here on a balmy November day in front of the Bahen Center for Information Technology. This building houses some of the most technologically centered departments in the university. We have engineering science, we have electrical engineering, both of them in this part of the building that sort of juts out over here. In the tower itself, we have computer science and we have mathematics. As you look at the building, notice there's a small brick building standing over there on the northern side that is a historically protected building that has been incorporated into this one. It is the former home of the Varsity newspaper, and so quite a few major journalists have gone through it. We're also butting up against the Koffler Center, which houses the U of T bookstore and quite a few of the services that are offered to students. Let's go across the street and go inside, get a sense of what this building is like. As we go through, I want you all to think about the design of this building. As engineers, something that is going to be extremely important is not just being able to build something which works well, but to do it so that it does what it's meant to do. And this building, we're going to see some nice things here and there, but we're also going to see a great focus on form over function. The two should be married together. And it starts right here at the very beginning. We come into these nice large doors, about 8 feet tall, something like that, and they're very pretty. They look quite impressive. They're even taller in some of the other entrances. And in order to maintain them, they have these piano hinges so that you have a great amount of support for the doors as they get used quite frequently throughout the day. However, when you have a piano hinge, you have a tremendous amount of contact surface between the different joints. And for the first 5 or 6 years of this building's existence, you could not maintain a conversation as you went through these doors because of the squeaking sound as the hinge was pulled open. If you're going to build something for a client, one of the important details to always remember is you have to tell the client how to use the whatever it might be, the building, the pipeline, the component. If they don't know that a bit of WD-40 goes a long way, you have to tell them. Let's go inside and see what else there is in here. As we walk in here and get in people's way, what we see is the hallway as you walk in. So this main lobby works quite nicely. You have on the one hand the very modern style of the Bahen Center, the concrete with steel and glass and dark stained wood. Pretty much every building that was put up in the entire city at about the turn of the millennium looks just like this. It got pretty old pretty fast, and this isn't one of the first buildings that looked like it. But also, you do get the beautiful effect of the Koffler Center built over, about a century ago. And it is a fantastic building. And you get this nice marriage of the two and a very large open hallway in which to walk. Let's go downstairs, begin our journey over there, and start to get a sense of what this building is like. We have an odd staircase over here, really just trying to find a way to use some space. Better than nothing. As we get here to the end of the hallway, we find an excellent idea poorly executed. And this is going to be the theme for the day. We have a number of these small, almost cubicles, where students are encouraged to sit down and study. And each of these has this fascinating piece of furniture, this wooden, dark wood plank with a little raised area over here, this sort of chaise longue kind of an effect. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite work as whatever you might want it to be. It's supposed to be a nice, comfortable place for people to sit down, study, maybe have their lunch. But wood, as excellent a material as it is, even for sitting surfaces, When you make just a very large, completely flat plank, it's not all that comfortable. There isn't a backing over here. You have to lean all the way back to the wall. I am not terribly tall, but I have quite a bit of difficulty getting to a decent angle over here. Certainly can't lean back against this because it's too short. It doesn't support your back. The angle of it is wrong. If you put down your laptop or your lunch over here, it's just a little bit too far away to be comfortable. And what you end up with is that some people do use this because they've run out of other rooms to sit down in and study, but it doesn't have anywhere near the amount of use that you would expect. Always keep in mind the ideas that went into putting this building together tend to be quite good, but the execution over here took a wonderful idea and just sort of threw it away. Our next stop is one of the classrooms of the building. And this is obviously the main part. This is the bit in which we have the most concerns. And we just need to turn on the lights in order to be able to get in here. The classroom looks nice. The person who did the job of cutting and staining all of these pieces of wood did a fantastic job of it. The problem is the design of the classroom itself. First of all, the acoustics go in the wrong direction. Everything that is said by students through the class, I can hear perfectly well. Meanwhile, I need to strain to get my voice heard across a class that can only hold about 100 students. This is unusual for me. I have a very loud voice. So it deadens the sound as it goes up, but magnifies it as it comes back down. And that's not a good effect for a teacher. We have another issue with the board. There's a screen that can come down to allow you to have all sorts of audiovisual parts for your lecture. But the screen comes down and takes up almost the entire board. They've recently moved it a little bit so that you have some small amount of room in which to be able to continue to chalk and talk while you're doing this, but it was not the original way that this room was set up. It's quite unfortunate, and it made it very difficult for those who want to both maintain a chalk and talk lecture and at the same time give the occasional bit of an audiovisual element. It made it impossible for us to be able to do both. You still have a system that doesn't work very well for quickly switching between the two options. The system itself has its own issues. They don't have to do with the design of the building itself, but it checks your password and your login when you go into it, but it doesn't actually check the time to make sure that it gives you the correct hour. It's the only clock in the room, and therefore it's completely useless. Another problem is that the wireless in this room it didn't work for the first few years. We now have installed up on the ceiling on the near wall a couple of these, I refer to them as spiders, and those allow us to have wireless connections within the room. But for the first few years, you only had the ability to get onto a network if you were sitting in the very back row and if the door was open, which is pretty impressive stuff. Let's walk our way up and see some of the things that happen outside the building, or rather outside the room. As we go up, we will see that there is a number of small panes of glass at the very top. They're supposed to allow you to see if there's a classroom going on inside or not, so that you know if to open the door or not. But unfortunately, the glass isn't translucent enough. Now we're at the back end of the hallway. There's some construction going on, so hopefully it won't be too loud in the video. But in this part of the hallway is where you tend to have students congregate. There are a number of classrooms over here, and so they need to sit down and wait until the previous class lets out. And if you look around, it's an awful view. It is genuinely terrible because what's happening is that this magnificent corridor that we saw from the other side when we came in, half of it is suddenly blocked by the back end of the staircase. And the staircase itself, when we look at it, we see that there were supposed to be 5 lights in it. 3 of them have been taken out because they're too far down. I don't know if they're worried about blinding people or about people actually walking into them. You also, at this point, realize that what the staircase does, even though it might look somewhat impressive as we walk in, it means that the flow of traffic, and there is a great amount of traffic here between hours, the flow of traffic is restricted to half of its original width. And that necessarily creates traffic jams. It's not quite DVP bad, but it certainly isn't very good. If we look above us, we can see the great staircase, which is supposed to be the main viewing point of the building. There's a lot of safety glass all over it because I guess they realized that it's not a good idea to have quite a few students running around all over the place and possibly jostling each other until one of them falls off. It wasn't a part of the original plan. It got put in sometime later. As we walk through, we're just going to take a quick glance down there, and I'll talk about what we see in a moment as we get further up and away from the noise. But there is a small room in the corner that serves as a very interesting function. What happens in that room is that it is perfectly round, and so you don't have any walls which are usable for hanging anything in. You don't have any furniture in that room, certainly nothing of the kind that was put everywhere else, because all of the furniture here is built using straight lines. And yet it is the best room in the entire building, not because of the architect, but because of the students. Because what the students did is they decided, we're going to find a way to take advantage of this room. And so these days it is used for 2 purposes. It is used for Muslim prayer 5 times a week, 5 times a day, and it is used for breakdancing at night. I'm not sure who came up with the combination, but I think it's kind of cool. Let's walk up this main staircase and get a sense of what the building is like floor by floor. The staircase started off moving perfectly straight. At this point it begins its great spiral around all the way up to the very top, more or less. But as we enter here, we see yet another point where the flow of traffic... You'll notice we had to stop because of the fire alarm. We have to evacuate the building in case, I don't know, I don't think that building is actually going to burn. We're going into the Koffler Center. Remember what we just saw a moment ago. We saw as we entered the corridor that these 2 buildings butt up against each other. The outer wall of the Koffler Center is the inner wall of the other building, of Bahen. Notice how it's significantly quieter here. The fire alarm for the Koffler Center is actually separate from the fire alarm for the Bahen Center. So the fire alarm is over. The building remains standing, shockingly. It has not collapsed upon itself like the House of Usher. But here we are in this corridor, so we've already mentioned the fact that the traffic in here gets narrowed down to about half its width. More interesting, however, is the way in which it gets narrowed down. This railing over here comes down, and the railing itself juts out past the stairs. It looks kind of cool, but what inevitably happens, and I always try to stand right where our camera is right now during September and watch as a couple of frosh walk around talking about how strange their calculus instructor is, and all of a sudden one of them gets folded in half by this railing. It's at a very unfortunate height, but it's hilarious for everyone who isn't the person getting hit. Let's continue this way. Up here on the 2nd floor we have quite a few tutorial rooms. They're reasonably nice rooms. They feel like very large boxes into which you can fit about 50 people on uncomfortable chairs. The carpeting is quite nice, but that's about the only positive feature. The thing that is the most troubling is what happens when you're writing a test or a quiz in one of these rooms. The handles themselves don't do anything. They're just there as something to grab onto. The locks are magnetic. And so when you walk in or out of any of these rooms, you hear a slight sound. And this happens every single time. So if you're writing a test or an exam, which we also have in these rooms, an exam is 2.5 hours long in engineering, 3 hours long if you're in arts and science. The number of people who have to go to the washroom is probably pretty significant. And for each and every single time you hear something that sounds an awful lot like someone cocking a shotgun in a Tarantino movie. And it's every time they go out and then come back in. It's quite a bit of noise, and it gets to be quite distracting while you're writing the test. Let's go back to the main staircase and start climbing it and see what happens on the 3rd and 4th floors. Now as we climb the staircase, it looks rather interesting. The effect is diminished by the extra safety glass that they've had to put in, but you do have a view of everything that's going on around you, and it looks kind of cool. But notice that what we're doing is we're just going around about 90 to 100 degrees worth of curve, and then the stairs run out. And we're going to have to walk all the way around in order to pick up the staircase again. Over here we're at the Great Hall of Computing, no longer quite as great as it used to be. This used to be in the beginning a room that was 3 stories high and held a computer lab. So you just had a lot of workstations all around it. The room itself is about 35 feet per side, and then went up 3 stories, which is about 30 to 35 feet. And that's pretty impressive. Now imagine the view. You're sitting, right? Sitting at your computer, and you are surrounded by these translucent panes of glass going all the way up. When you're tall, you shouldn't be wearing pinstripes. The effect was a very disconcerting one. It felt as if the ceiling was going on forever, or rather the walls were going on forever, and they were going to collapse on you at some point. It really wasn't a very pleasant place to be. They've now put in ceilings at every floor, and it's used as 3 separate areas, including a few new labs and other interesting pieces. But if you want to see it at its best, if you want to see the Bahen Center look really, really good, what you should do is you should look at the pilot episode for the series Fringe. It was shot here in Toronto, and the Great Hall of Computing was used as the headquarters for Fringe Division. I don't know what kind of a filter they used for their cameras, but I want it installed in my eyes. The next corridor starts up the same way as the old one did. Before we go up this staircase, we're going to look further down the hallway and see a lot of interesting bits, including what is, in my opinion, the best design element of the building from the actual architect's point of view. The best thing that he was able to do with this. And what we have over here is these small bays in which students can sit down and study. You have a table, you have a couple of chairs, you have some nice benches. The backrests aren't very comfortable and they're at the wrong angle. Everything is bolted down to the floor because apparently we can't be trusted to not move these tables and hurl them over the balcony or something. But you have a blackboard with some excellent bits of mathematics on it. We did not set that up. You have the ability to get together with friends and work. These places tend to be filled throughout the day. The reason they're not right now is because it is unconscionably early, even with our break for the fire alarm. The only other issue with these is that only one of them is close to a power outlet. And so if you need to recharge something, there's one station, one of these bays where everyone tries to get to it first. And that's the good one. But the rest are still quite useful. What we're approaching now is the point at which we are able to enter the old varsity headquarters. And it's a rather odd building. What we find out over here is that poor design is not simply a matter for the millennial buildings. It existed quite a while back. If we look out this window at the roof of the neighboring place, we see a doorway leading out over nothing. And I taught in the room. That attic over there was used as a classroom for a number of years, and it was one of the worst rooms that I've ever had to be in. It was very clearly an attic converted into a classroom. There were load-bearing beams here and there that disturbed everyone's line of sight. The windows were all painted shut. That door was obviously impossible to open. And there was another smaller door next to it that led either to Wonderland or possibly into the fuse boxes. It's since been converted into office space, and very useful office space at that. But something that is interesting is that the third floor of that building can only be accessed from within Bahen, from this corridor right over here. You can't get to it from the building itself. The lower two floors of the building, you can get into them through the main entrance that we saw at the very beginning of this video, or if you have electrical access to it, you can get in through the corridors below us right now. Let's go back and climb up to the fourth floor. As we climb up now, we see that there's less safety glass. We have gotten rid of quite a few of the students. All of the rambunctious engineers don't go up past the third floor except on the other side of the building. So it's a lot safer now. We can have people fall out over here and over there, but over here, they're still protected. Brand new rooms over there on the right-hand side. These did not exist beforehand. This is a part of the old Great Hall of Computing. I have no idea what goes on in there, but the rooms are quite lovely. Notice the washrooms, the men's and women's, have switched sides. Not an intelligent piece of design, not by a long shot. But if we stop over here and we can get our shot angled just enough so that we can see both the corridor behind me and perhaps the corridor below on the third floor. The perspective might not be obvious in our shot, but what you will notice if you walk through here is that the corridor over here is set back significantly further than the one below. This is another nice bit of design, without any sarcasm. What happens is that in the second and third floors, the corridor is further in our direction so that you have room for very large labs and tutorial rooms on one side of it. By the time we come here, there are no longer any major classrooms, so the corridor is shifted back to allow you to have the exact same footprint, but now there are 2 rows of offices or smaller labs to work with. A nice piece. Let's keep going up. Recreational. There isn't much to the fifth floor in the sense that it's not much different from the fourth floor, but it does have one thing that I really, really like. Behind me is a lab, and it has the coolest doorbell that I have ever seen. The camera over there picks you up when you're really close, and then it projects your image, and next to the image are the names of the different people in the office. And you physically point to the name that you want, and that rings the doorbell and tells them that there's someone waiting for them. I have resisted the urge so far in my career to go over there and ring as many doorbells as I can, but I'm not sure that it's going to last terribly long. As we start going up the staircase over here, you'll notice that we have done away with all of the safety glass. At this point, we're down to just CS majors, mathematicians, and the people who work at the professional labs on the top 2 floors. By now, if people fall over the edge, they fall over the edge. Every university has its story of students who get lost in a building and are never to be seen again. In the University of Waterloo, on the 6th floor, there's supposed to be a student who's been lost, a freshman who hasn't been heard from in years, but you hear his cries along the hallways. Wonderful stuff. Our 6th floor is interesting too. You'll notice we're on the 7th. We just came back from the 5th floor. If you go back, you will notice that there's a very small doorway hidden aside, and if you don't pay attention, you walk right past it. And we do have students walking up and down and up and down, 5th floor, 7th, 5th floor, 7th, not sure where the math department is. And one of them told me this wonderful story. He said he was walking around and couldn't find his way into the department when suddenly a student comes by and says to him, "Are you looking for the math department?" He says, "Yeah, I am." And he says, then the student pulled out this magical key, and we walked halfway down the stairs, and suddenly there was a door there, and he was able to open it with this magical key, and an entire floor opened up. It's a wonderful story, this great fairy tale. One thing, yes, the math department, or rather the 6th floor, is there to be locked down. Rumor has it, the rumor that I have heard, and I have no fact to guarantee that this is correct. Rumor has it that the idea was that an entire floor of the building be something that you can lock down completely and absolutely, so that we would be able to attract big name clients, IBM, HP, something like that, and tell them we have this work area where you can be completely secure. A nice idea. We've ended up, however, with the department that uses the least number of technological tools in its arsenal. Computer science needs to have good computers. Electrical engineering, engineering science, they all need some very high-level labs. Mathematics, we need a lot of paper and we need pens. Maybe pencils if you're not sure about what you're going to write, but let's be honest, you want to do math and pen. The only thing is, the floor is still on lockdown. If you want to get to the elevators to go up to the 6th floor after hours, you need to have one of these fobs. Fob is an incorrect word. It actually is supposed to refer to the chain that holds your pocket watch, but let's leave it at that. The only problem is, out of all 6 elevators that go up to this floor, 5 of them have had their electric fob readers removed. So if you do not have the correct elevator at the time that you're looking for it, there's nothing you can do about it. I've come in to exchange exams at 2 a.m. on a Saturday morning or night, or I wasn't sure at the time, and got the wrong elevator, and the only thing that you can do is either go up to the 7th floor and walk down. You're not going to go to the 5th and walk up. That's fighting against gravity. Or you send the elevator up and then call the next one and hope that that's the right one. Another issue with coming in at that time is that those fob readers do not exist at every single exit. As a matter of fact, there's only one, and it is right next to the Megabytes Cafe, which is in the area where we saw the prayer room. It's a nice area, but it is farther away from any street access than any of the other entrances. And so if you want to get in through that doorway, you have to park somewhat farther away than you would normally. You have to walk all the way over there while carrying a couple hundred exams. They're heavy things. I probably shouldn't make them quite this tough. Make your way in, hope for the right elevator, make your way up, exchange the exams, go back out, and keep walking. It's not a brilliant piece of design, but this isn't as bad as it gets. We're about to get to the really fun bits. The first one, the first sign that something is off, is the fact that as we go towards the staircase that'll take us from the 7th floor to the 8th, we know there's an 8th because the elevators go up to the 8th floor, we find ourselves out of staircase. Seems to be a bit of an issue, but then if you go back to the footage that we had of me walking up the stairs, you'll notice I was walking underneath a sloped ceiling, so there must be a staircase. Let's go back and see if we can find it. Right over here, we notice that there is indeed a staircase, but in order to get to it, we have to go backwards rather than continue in the pattern that was set for the first few floors. Before we climb up, notice this small balcony over here. Very lovely. You can stand over it and look down, and if the corridor wasn't so narrow, it would have a really nice view. But you will also notice that there are almost no paper airplanes above this level. So my theory is that this is the source of most, if not all, of the paper airplanes that we find jammed into every I-beam in this building. The 8th floor. Before we go to see the really interesting bits, there's just one small thing over in this direction. Right over there we see a sign for Fire Emergency Area of Refuge for the Disabled. Let's find out if anyone used it during this fire alarm. The room is right down here, but first we're going to try to get a shot against the sun of the city in its glory. There's quite a bit that we can see out there. There's the AGO, there's OCAD University. The AGO has a facade and a staircase designed by Frank Gehry. OCAD University is a big black and white box hanging on stilts that are shaped like pencils. You have what is apparently supposed to be called the Rogers Center, but will always be known as the Sky Dome. You see a thriving city. You see a bustling, very modern city. It's quite impressive. Keep it in mind because we're going to come back to it in just a little while. Meanwhile, over here we have the Fire Emergency Area of Refuge for the Disabled. An excellent idea. If you're disabled and there's a fire emergency, you come over here and you know that the firefighters will arrive to help you out. If you're disabled and on the 7th floor, you are, as Dirty Harry says, SOL. Furthermore, this corner right over here is directly above the Megabytes Cafe, which means that this point is at the farthest point to any access to the building from a street. And so you are supposed to wait at the section that is diametrically opposed to where the firefighters will actually be entering the building. Let's go to yet another piece of the design here. As we come around over here, we see this very nice Romeo and Juliet type balcony from which you can have excellent productions of Shakespearean plays. If only you don't mind the fact that you'll be yelling, "Wherefore art thou, O Romeo," to someone who is about 100 feet down from you. The idea for this area is nice. We have a glass ceiling above us that is supposed to bring in a tremendous amount of natural light. If only it wasn't so completely obstructed by this bizarre cylinder of concrete. But as we look at it and as we try to understand why you would have such a nice ceiling and then obscure it, we also notice there's something above our heads. Right over there, there are these gigantic louvers, and past them is an entire extra floor. But the elevators only go up to the 8th. So let's go exploring. Let's see if we can figure out why there appears to be a 9th floor in a building that should only have 8 of them. As we do this, let's notice that when we get to doorways, it's not quite as nice over here, but you can see that there are grates at the top for the HVAC system. So heating, ventilation, air conditioning. Those bits come in from the top, and yet as we're walking around, we see on the floor these circular grates that seem to serve very similar purposes. Well, they're two separate systems. we have one ventilation system for air conditioning, another ventilation system for heating. And the heating systems are the ones that run along the ceiling. The air conditioning are the ones here on the floor. Take just a moment to review your grade 12 physics and tell me what the problem with that is. As we walk down, we see a view of the city to the west. And if we look out there, what we're going to notice is that the city that you see through this window is about 50 years older than the city that we saw through the southern exposure. If you want to have an understanding of the issues facing this town politically, this tells you everything you need to know. All of the details are there. You just need to figure out how to draw the correct conclusions. Now, the reason we came to this corridor is because the way to the 9th floor is through here. We go through this staircase out in the middle of nowhere, or rather at the end of nowhere. And we come to the rest of the staircase that goes up to the 9th. And what happens is that up there we have housed all of the HVAC systems. So the heating, the ventilation, the cooling, the elevators, all of the motors are up here. So it's machinery. Machinery breaks down every now and then, not terribly often, but when it does, it's inconvenient. You have machines that weigh hundreds of pounds that you have to exchange. Well, the elevators only go up to the 8th. So what we have to do is bring the replacement machines up to the 8th floor, wheel them across the carpets, mind you. Keep in mind the last time you had to move a piano across a carpet. And we come down over here and bring the machine, which hopefully fits through the door that we just entered. And when we look up, what we see, well, pay careful attention to what you just saw on your screen, because we're going to come back to it. What we see is an I-beam with a very large winch that is going to allow you to move the machine all the way up. Fair enough. There are even controls behind us that allow you to turn the, to control the winch, allow it to go up and down. But notice there's no key over there. If you want to actually turn on the winch, you have to squeeze past this multi-hundred-pound machine, walk all the way up here. Over here you can unlock it at the very top of at the 9th floor. You can unlock it, you can come back down, you can bring the winch down, and then hook up the machine. But remember what you just saw as the camera panned up. You saw, first and foremost, before you noticed the I-beam and the winch, you saw the bottom of the balcony on the 9th floor. It actually overhangs the staircase. And so when you lift up the machine, what happens is that the chain is going to drag against the balcony, and once the object moves far enough up, it's going to bump against stair after stair, for at least the first 2 of them. Let's move a little bit further up. If we take a careful look at the bottom of this balcony, we see that the concrete has been eaten away by the chain being dragged up and down a whole bunch of times. We will also see some dents, well not dents, but markings on the stairs themselves, because if you're lifting a machine that weighs however much it might, you don't really want to get between it and a large piece of concrete. That's not a good thing for your fingers. You'll notice that the balcony that I'm resting my hands on is got this very lovely curve to it. But then if you look a little bit more closely, you realize this isn't a man-made curve, at least not a purposeful one. There's nothing symmetric about it. The balcony got grabbed right over here and pulled up for an inch or 2 before someone was able to stop it. So it tells you quite a bit about how effective this piece of design is. Think about all of the mistakes that you've seen in the way that this building was put together. As engineers, you are the only line of defense between bad design and its execution. Architects from some universities come out understanding the way that things need to be used. And this doesn't go just for civil engineers. Whatever field you're in, your client is going to be asking you for something, and there is a chance that he will be coming to you with a design. Whoever designs the project that you're going to be working on might not be very good at understanding how it's going to be used, might not be very good at understanding the marriage between form and function. The people who put this place together, the ones who actually built it, they did a fine job of it. And I am absolutely certain that there were a number of them who, while working, pointed out, this bit is dumb, this bit isn't going to work. But they're not getting paid to go to their bosses and say the building doesn't work. They get fired at that point and they need the job. As engineers, you are the only ones who are close enough to the design stage to be able to actually fix it, and the only ones at a high enough position that you are able to actually talk about it without fear of your job. Some of you will actually be not just the engineers of the project, but also its designers at opening stages. I just want to make one thing completely clear. If any of you ever design something like this building over here, I will find out, I will know, and I will come to you and I will take away your iron ring. Don't ask how, I will be able to do it. But keep all of this in mind as a piece of a study on how not to put together design. And then take a tour of the Monk Center. It's up on Davenport and Hoskin. And that building is an overlay. As a matter of fact, it's an overlay of 3 buildings. A large C, and what they did is they modernized all 3 of these very old structures. This is difficult to do. This is a tough job. And yet, you see in the building piece after piece of excellent design, of taking ceilings that are too low, taking open areas, and finding ways to use them in a very clever way so that the ceiling doesn't seem quite as low in the basement of these buildings. There are now covered areas between the buildings, and very comfortable ones at that. If there's enough interest, we can do a video of that building as well, but I recommend just going through and discovering it on your own.